out that hasn't been mentioned, and that is that pursuant to your point, Maya, I deal with the very poor and the very rich. And what I have found is all the people that are loving the lockdown, they're really enjoying it because they feel like they're doing something great for humanity. The people that are locked away all have income coming to them. They all either
Right. They
work
haven't
from
lost
home
anything. Right.
before that, or they've been getting checks in the mail because they're retired, or they have some sort of trust fund. And all the people that I know that had to go to work to make money, they hate the lockdown and they're against it. And I've seen this tells me a lot about human nature. That if all of a sudden you find out that you can't pay your rent and you can't put food on the table for your kids, all of a sudden you're not so convinced that the lockdown is the only answer. Okay, I check that one out, Rick. Ask some of the
Well,
people
hold
that
on,
are.
fucking hold on, because I guess this is a week where I kind of agree with you on a lot of shit. And on that, yeah, I mean, because I had a good TV job for a long time, and I live in a house that, well, my wife and I live in a house, and I was like,
Right.
earlier today, I was saying to my wife is like, holy shit, if we had to quarantine in our first apartment in New York City, if we had to spend 24 hours a day together in 300 square feet, that would be
You would have killed each
fucking
other by now,
brutal.
right?
Yeah. So I mean, we're lucky because I had a good job for a long time. And you're right that if you know that people who have to work are fucked and are going to be more willing than I am to go out among the reasonable people and among the assholes who like there've been all these stories in the news about people who are just so offended at having to wear a mask someplace that they go crazy and they just shoot somebody. Um, it's I mean life's scary out there anyway. And to add all this on top of, anything can happen anytime, and now this just adds a whole couple other layers of risk. And yeah, if you're poor, that you're gonna. I mean, the statistics show that you're gonna anyway.
Yeah.
All
Poverty
right,
kills
so should
also.
we? What did you say, Maya?
I said poverty kills. I mean,
Yeah, well, that's the
poverty. I
other
mean,
issue is that if I hadn't actually broken the law and kept my business open, I would be out on the street. I got a letter from my landlord 2 months ago saying they expect the rent. So I would have been out on the street, but I had to break the law. So that's what these Democrats have done to me. They've made me a criminal. Now,
So well, I thought they made it illegal to evict, or is that
no,
just for?
I mean, the other thing is that I wouldn't be able to pay any of my other bills. I would have had zero money whatsoever. That's what I'm
Mhm.
looking at. So
All
if
right.
you want to go for, if you think I could go for 3 months without any income whatsoever, I'm sorry, not, and I'm doing better than a lot of people.
right.
So anyway, let's change the subject, Maya. I don't know how interested you are in national politics and the Spygate scandals, but Rick and I have an ongoing debate on that.
Okay.
You're welcome to continue if you want, uh, but that's what I'd like to talk about. Is that how do we
Uh,
feel about that?
I go. You guys could go ahead and open it up, and I'll let you know if I have something to contribute because I'm definitely interested in it.
All right, well,
I mean,
let me
I definitely have an
begin.
opinion, is what I'm trying to say.
Very good. Well, then let me begin because last week, while you weren't on the show, Rick was dumbfounded by the idea that Michael Flynn could possibly have been found innocent. And it turns out they dropped the charges against him, like I predicted. And what I actually told Rick that they would do this 2 years ago, because one of Rick's main arguments against Trump is he was surrounded by dishonest people. And it turns out that they actually lied about Papadopoulos. They framed Flynn and they made something up that they will probably be prosecuted for about Carter Page. The only one that they actually got was a fellow named Manafort, and they got him on tax problems from 10 years ago.
Michael Cohen?
So,
How about Michael Cohen?
no, oh, Michael Cohn had some sort of business problem, taxi badges in New York. It had nothing to do with politics or Trump. So the point is that your side, it turns out, they weren't ordered by Trump to end the Flynn investigation. The Democrat prosecutor, or the prosecutor that's been trying desperately to imprison uh, General Flynn, he dropped the charges. He dropped the
Well, he
case.
quit. No, wait. The guy in charge of it quit the Department of Justice in apparent protest of Barr submitting a motion from the department that the charges be dropped.
No, this week,
Wait,
he
right, and you know why?
the
You know why he's
prosecutors have given up. Okay, they didn't
The
resign; they
DOJ
gave up.
said, yeah, we want these charges to be withdrawn. It's still up to what I said to last week is wait to see what the judge says because
Well, that
Flynn,
the judge can't continue a case when there's nobody prosecuting anymore, Rick.
well, he can because um, the DOJ just filed a motion to drop the charges, and it's up to the judge how to proceed.
I understand that, Rick, but there's not a judge in the United States that will continue a case when the prosecutor has given up.
Except
Okay?
that Flynn not only pled guilty on paper, he also pled guilty in front of the judge.
I
So
understand. And he's made a motion to withdraw that. You're allowed to in America to do
yeah,
that.
okay, but
withdraw your plea. Yeah.
it's still up to the judge, and that's what I said last week.
Well, Rick,
And I
Rick,
guess
it would be something that has never that is a billion to one. Okay, Rick. Now I know that you're a stubborn guy, but the defense has said that Flynn is innocent. The prosecution has given up, and it's a billion to one that any judge in the United States will continue the case when no one is prosecuting it. So
well,
I assure you, as desperately as you cling to this sliver of possibility, Flynn is a free man.
okay. I mean, I'll still say wait and see.
Well,
I
there
mean,
Well, I mean,
the reason that the prosecution has dropped the charges is because it turns out the note it turns out that the FBI actually dropped their investigation in December of 2017 of Flynn, and they concluded that Flynn hadn't done anything wrong. They could not find anything. That was in the notes that were released.
what did
And
the notes
so
say? Because the notes I
the
read
note,
were just that the FBI were notes about the agents talking among themselves about how do we approach this? Do we tell Flynn that we know what we know, or do we not tell him and have him tell us and see if he'll tell us the truth?
no,
no, it was
that's
more
not
than
what
that.
happened, Rick.
It was
Here's
more
Wait,
than
what
that.
happened.
no, hold on.
There,
Let Maya wants to say something.
Right, and I was gonna say, I was just gonna, I think the timeline is a little bit off. I think it was in January. It was right before the swearing in of President Trump. But I think they were going to close the case because they basically had nothing on him. They basically arrived at the conclusion. But the handwritten note that Lance is referring to basically said, "What is our goal here? Are we trying to just get him fired, or are we trying to?" Get him to lie and then say that he lied to the FBI. Basically, it was they were trying to pin something on him. They found the guy, and then they were gonna try and make up a crime to pin on him. So that's what the other reason why he was being why he's now a free man, because they've done everything wrong about this. When you cannot trust that the FBI is acting in good faith, you cannot. I mean, when people are saying, I've seen people are saying, like my friends or whatever, that, oh my gosh, our justice system is gone. I cannot believe Flynn is free, and completely ignoring the fact that our justice system has been completely undermined by the people in charge of it. You had people in the DOJ, in Obama's DOJ, saying we've got nothing on him. He's clean. There's no evidence of him of any kind. I mean, the only problem they had with him is that he traveled to Russia in 2015, something like that,
Well, what about
and
what about
and
the
then
work
he's
he was
spoken to
doing
some.
for Turkey and not
No, no, no,
telling?
that's not why they got him. I'm not actually sure about the Turkey part, but I do
I
know.
know I can answer that if you want.
Go ahead.
Flynn, uh, Flynn was working for a company that had Turkey as a client, and technically he was supposed to register as a foreign agent because of that. So in other words, when you work with a company that works with a foreign country, there's a form you have to fill out that registers you as a foreign agent. Now they were trying to get this guy for that. Apparently, a huge percentage of the people in Washington are doing some work for some company that has something to do with a foreign country. And so as a result, nobody gets prosecuted for this. So it's highly, highly, highly unusual to prosecute somebody for not filling out the form saying that you're a foreign agent.
This is for a
Don't
Logan
interrupt.
Act
Don't.
violation,
No,
right?
no.
Logan.
That's two different things. Two different things. Listen to me. It turns out that they'd have to imprison thousands and thousands of people in Washington that haven't technically said I registered as a foreign agent. It's a technicality, Rick. Now that leads to something. I was trying to do this in order, but Maya does great work here, so I'm going to let her interrupt me. But the Logan Act, I'll have to do this out of order. The Logan Act, it turns out, according to Sally Yates, who was the Assistant Attorney General, was brought up by Obama in the meeting before the FBI went to try to frame Flynn, the day before. Now, what happened was Obama hated Flynn because Flynn said that that Obama was losing the war in the Middle East, which of course was true. And Flynn had promised that if he got in charge of that he wanted to reform the intelligence agencies by cutting down their numbers dramatically and cleaning out the people that he thought were not that were partisan or corrupt. And the day before the FBI sent over the two agents to frame him, there was a meeting between Comey of the FBI, Sally Yates of the who was the Assistant Attorney General, and Obama. And according to
Do
notes
we
that
have notes
were
from this? How do we know this
yes,
meeting?
testimony, and Adam Schiff kept this testimony secret. It was just released this week. According to that testimony of Sally Yates, Obama had first brought up the Logan Act. Now let me explain or refresh your memory briefly about the Logan Act. In the 250 years that this country has existed, they have never prosecuted anybody for the Logan Act because it's simply a law that was made by John Adams because he wanted people that went to other countries to not say that they represented the US government. So it's a law that you can't prosecute people for that because you'd have to prosecute anybody that went overseas and said something, and it's just too hard to prove. And as a result, in 250 years, no one's ever been prosecuted. It is a technicality. It's on the books, but it's a technicality. And so what Obama was discussing with Yates was, can we get Flynn on the Logan Act? And the reason that they wanted to get him on the Logan Act was because 2 weeks before Trump took office, he had had meetings with ambassadors from various foreign countries. which was his job.
Right.
He was on the U.S. payroll, but because Trump hadn't technically taken office, Obama was telling the FBI to use the Logan Act as a technical reason that they could get Flynn. Now, the next day, the next day, we found out from emails that have now been released that one, they didn't read him his Miranda rights because they wanted to entrap him, which is, by the way, illegal. That would throw it out of court right there. Okay, if someone comes to you from the FBI and they present to you that they're just your buddy and they want to talk about life, and instead you're the target of an investigation and you are meant to be arrested from what you may say, then they have to reveal to you that you're a target. It's the Miranda rights. And that's
Yeah, no,
why,
I
Rick,
understand.
Rick, Rick, that's why they didn't tell him. And there are emails back and forth between Strzok and Page saying, we have to give him his Miranda rights. And they decided that they wouldn't do it just because they wanted to trick him.
And actually, Comey admitted it. He was on one of the TV shows. He was on.
Yeah,
It was some whatever that show was,
I
and
mean,
he
I
actually
he's
don't
in
know.
a
She
vet.
That's
asked him, "How is it?"
all I
I'm
know.
sorry.
I know from Twitter, and Twitter's saying no, you don't. Even if you haven't been read your Miranda rights, it's still illegal to lie to the FBI. But I don't
That,
know.
Well,
that is
actually, no,
true.
wait, but
It's
wait a
got
minute. Wait,
nothing to.
there's
He
there's
wasn't
three
talking.
things. There are three things. First of all, this meeting that occurred in Obama's office was a few weeks after the FBI had dropped their investigation of Flynn because they couldn't find anything. So they had an emergency meeting where they decided that they were going to try to catch Flynn in a perjury trap. And that's the meeting where Obama told Comey and the FBI it was decided. Sally Yates verified it that they were going to still try and get Flynn with something. And so they decided they were going to get him in a perjury trap, which means they had a transcript of a. So, in other words, they did not have a case. They could not find any law that he'd broken by coordinating with the Russians or colluding. So now they decided to get him in a perjury trap. And that's why they dropped the charges, Rick, because it if if you don't have a case, you can't then go to a guy with a transcript of his phone call. And if he doesn't remember word for word everything in it, you can't say, okay, that's perjury. You lied to the FBI.
So this seems like a testable hypothesis here, where you have Comey, you've got Strunk and Page and Sally Yates and all these people. Um, are you now on my side? The people whose tweets I read say that Bill Barr's 100-page brief asking that the charges against Flynn be dropped is nakedly, and I don't want to get. I mean, I'm just saying what I'm. You made the case. And I'm going to avoid getting in an argument by claiming fairly complete ignorance and saying that all I've read is that the brief written by Attorney General Barr was just wildly disingenuous and politically biased. And I can't defend those tweets because I don't know enough about it. But I hear from some of what I read that everybody that you're talking about, on up to maybe even Obama, everybody's going to get prosecuted. So are you willing to say that charges will be brought against everybody in this cabal to get Flynn in trouble? The charges will be brought against them,
Hey,
say
can
Maya,
I
do you
before
respond
want
real
to
ele-
quick?
respond or should I?
Sure. Yeah. Actually, I was gonna say, can I respond real quick? I was just gonna say, I think they ought to be, but in my humble opinion, unfortunately, I have a feeling that they will not be, and I don't know why, but I mean, call me naive, but I think I've lost faith in our ability to prosecute this because I mean, unfortunately, in this whole situation, the the timeline and everything that's whether it's Flynn or even Trump himself have been accused of, we've already proven that it's the others, the people who have accused him of it are guilty of that themselves. They were the ones who colluded with the Russians. They were the ones who, um, lied and subverted and created, basically. I mean, I don't want to say fibbed. They I mean, created things out of whole cloth, which means they, whether it's crimes or whether it's entrapment or whatever, all of the things that they weren't supposed to do and they've done. And the problem, I mean, even the fact when Comey, like what I was trying to say before, is when he was telling that whoever was interviewing him, that she said, how did those two agents end up talking to Flynn without any attorney present or anything like that? And he's like, I sent them there. He doesn't even try to hide it. He just so casually and offhandedly thinks, hey, I knew that the place was in chaos. It was just during transition time. I could get away with it, so I did. I sent them there to talk to him, and then they knew, kind of like what Lenz was saying. Like, if like, you can't remember, even though they knew, they could have told him, hey, we have the transcript of that phone call, and if you say anything that's incorrect, they can be held against you. Rather than doing that, they just let him say whatever he said, and then saying, oh, well, now he lied to the FBI. So unfortunately, even though we have proof of all of that now, I mean, I hope that somebody gets prosecuted for this, because they should be held accountable. But so far, I haven't seen any. I haven't seen
Right.
any
Well,
proof that
Let
let,
me
that
let me
might have
make an
let me,
argument. Let me make an argument
no,
here. I would say, and I don't think you can disagree with me on this, that the FBI and whoever else was involved with all this stuff that we've been arguing about for 3 years, um, that a lot of what happened, a lot of what the FBI did and the people supervising the FBI did, a lot of it happened because they didn't like Trump. Can we agree on that?
that's a given,
yes.
I think.
Okay. And then, so we agree on that. And then I would further my argument by saying that the reason they didn't like Trump is they didn't like his demeanor and behavior, right? I
Sure.
mean, it's not because it wasn't about his hair. It was about the way he, and a lot of the way Trump does. Trump is very Trumpy in the way he does business.
He also bit
Um,
Hillary. Don't forget. Don't forget. He bit Hillary. He wasn't supposed to, but he did.
Yeah, but I mean, there are arguments to be made because there's a whole argument to be made that I don't think gets made enough, which is that the whole New York FBI office was very pro-Trump and they were friends with Rudy Giuliani and they were leaking information and doing other stuff because they were pro-Trump. So, um, I mean, which makes sense that some people in the FBI would be Republicans because the
Okay.
FBI is law and order. Republicans are law and order. Not everybody in the FBI is going to be, it takes a village. Um, but I mean, the way Trump does business is, well, he does business all over the place, all over the world. And he gets loans all over the world. He buys and sells shit and he licenses his name all over the world. And so, on the one hand, people can dislike him for, he's a guy who, brags about all the women he's banged. Maybe they didn't like his style. On the
Could
other
you
hand,
get to the point, Rick?
okay, here's my point that uh, some people looking at Trump may have looked at Trump's all of his foreign entanglements and all the people that he has relationships with because he's a rich guy who's buddies with rich guys around the world, including a bunch of Arabs, including Israelis,
Could you get to
including
the point,
Russians.
Rick?
All right, so this guy, I don't know shit, but this guy knows a lot. The Seth Abramson guy, and if you want to learn more about some of the stuff that
Okay.
disturbed that disturbed Seth Abramson, who's a former prosecutor turned journalist, who's been following Trump versus the FBI and Trump's foreign entanglements, and writes long. Look at him on Twitter, Seth Abramson. He writes long, highly detailed um, chains of tweets, the
But how does
hundreds of
that
tweets.
incriminate Flynn? How does he incriminate Flynn? What
It
does that
it
have to do with
explains
Flynn going?
everything that Flynn had his fingers in, and everything. It's
What did Flynn have his fingers in, Rick?
like Flynn was working for Erdogan, the
He
Turkish.
was working for a company that worked for Erdogan.
Yeah,
There's
and he
thousands
was
of people
writing.
that
He was
have
like,
that,
without
but
telling the
that's not
U.S.,
against the law, Rick. Rick, it's
without
not
telling
against
the
the law.
U.S., without registering as a foreign agent, he was like writing op-eds for
He registered
newspapers.
as a foreign agent before, right after the meeting. There was no, that was a technicality he took care of before Trump took office.
Well, what I'm saying is, I can't explain all this stuff very well, but this
Okay,
guy
Rick,
can. If
Rick
you want to learn
I've
more
got more.
about it,
Rick, we get the idea. Can I say
okay,
something now? Can I continue? You've showed the
sure,
book.
sure.
You've said the name.
But
All
wait,
right,
let me just
now,
finish. Let me wrap up my argument that
yeah.
that the FBI looks at Trump and his network of foreign friends and entanglements, and they're like, it seems like there has to be something dirty here. And then they're like, let's poke at it. That's
But that's not how law enforcement is supposed to work. You're supposed to, if there's a
okay.
crime, then you investigate and you find out who did the crime. You don't say, hey, I don't like this guy. I'm going to see if I can find a crime to pin on him. That's not how law enforcement works. At least it should not in this country. That would be my argument.
Okay.
All right. Now, there were several things that came out this week that were that had not been revealed before. The first is, I would just like to say to your argument, Rick, because this relates directly. Rod Rosenstein gave was the one that hired Mueller to investigate Trump, and nobody they there they had not revealed the sentence number one. That is, what are your powers, Mueller? Okay, so in other words, he was hired as a special prosecutor, but there was a secret uh, codicil and when hiring him as to what it is that he was supposed to find out. We knew generally collusion with Russia from Trump. It turns out that Rod Rosenstein had given Mueller the broadest possible powers,
Mandate.
mandate to look at, thank you for the word mandate, the broadest possible mandate, meaning zero limits. Mueller had the ability to look into anything he thought was of any interest that Trump may have done. And that included his financial dealings, anybody he ever met from Russia, anything. There was no limits put on it. And he couldn't find anything. According to the Mueller report, he could not prove any collusion between Trump and Russia. So that's what we found out this week. There's more. According to secret testimony under oath that Adam Schiff had tried to keep the public from seeing, this testimony was given a couple years ago. Now, you may not know this, Rick, but there's somebody above Comey, and that is a fellow named Clapper. Clapper actually is authority over all intelligence, FBI, CIA. And in secret testimony, they asked him a specific question. Did you find any collusion between Trump and Russia? And Clapper said no. There is no evidence that I have found for any collusion between Trump and Russia. But that's not all. They asked there was one other person, the second highest person in the Justice Department under the Attorney General, who would be intimately aware of all these things, was Sally Yates, the Assistant Attorney General. Asked her under oath in a secret meeting that was revealed today, this week, did you have did you find any collusion between Trump and Russia? And she said no. There is no evidence of any collusion between Trump and Russia. Now, knowing that, both Clapper and Adam Schiff Adam Schiff was in the committee at that time. He was the one listening to the testimony, and Clapper was the one giving the testimony. Both Adam Schiff and Clapper announced in public on the news on CNN that they believed Trump was a Russian traitor and that they had evidence for it. So your news media for 3 years was promoting a lie to you that Trump colluded with Russia and that Clapper and Adam Schiff had evidence for it, which they stated publicly on the news, on CNN. And it turns out that in secret testimony, from the very beginning, they admitted that they had no evidence whatsoever. And that Mueller had the broadest possible ability to investigate any financial problem that Trump may have had with Russia. So
All
for
right.
3 years, you've been living in a dream world that was created for you by your media. And everything I've said, there's a document for.
Oh, okay. So a couple things. One is I would think that Mueller kind of limited, even when given an unlimited mandate, I would think that for whatever reasons, including just practicality and being able to do the investigation within a
Well,
reasonable amount
he
of time.
had $30 million and 20 lawyers and all the FBI he wanted.
Okay,
So he
but I
didn't have
still
any
think
limits financially. He
I
had
I
$30
think
million.
he
I think it was like
I
40
think he
million.
li
Yeah.
Yeah, he
I
had
think
$40
he
million.
limited. All right, I think he limited his mandate, and I've been
Do you have
told
any
maybe
reason
this
to believe
isn't
that?
what
Do you have any reason to believe that?
just what I've read or seen on the news is that I was told, and I don't know where everything stands now, but that I was told that Mueller was limiting his investigation to a couple very specific areas. One, collusion, two, obstruction of justice, and anything else that he came across, he was spinning off to either other ongoing investigations or investigations that he suggested should exist. I don't know what the status of those things are. If there are any other investigations going on right now, if there ever were, but that's what I read or was told. And that's, I mean, all I
But at
can
the
do
end of
is tell you what I was read or was told. And so, and with regard to, what you're saying, um, you just said my media has been telling me this for 3 years based on there not being the record of this secret testimony. So um, I don't know if you can blame me for believing stuff that the media told me, even though for the past like many months I've been saying, no, I don't believe that Trump colluded with Russia. I believe that there was manipulation, psychological manipulation. Um, so, I mean, yeah, given this new stuff, which I have to read about, and then promptly forget because I seem to remain fairly ignorant no matter how much I read about this stuff. Um, okay, so it seems like yeah, people were trying to fuck over Trump. So that leaves me with just one argument, which is when people who didn't like Trump looked at Trump and were like, should we, see what he's up to? Um, I would say, given the results of having Trump as president, um, that skepticism about Trump was well founded,
what,
even if it
what
didn't.
which skepticism? What are you referring to?
The skepticism that Trump would be the fear that Trump would be a disastrous president, given
How?
like,
Go ahead.
well, I mean, a president needs a certain amount of luck. So Bush had terrible luck as president. He, a few months into his presidency, he gets hit with 9/11. Clinton never had a 9/11. Clinton had a reasonably successful presidency, but Clinton never fucking had a 9/11. 9/11 fucking changed everything. Would any president have been able to stop that? Would have, unlikely.
Actually,
Had Gore.
I've seen some evidence actually, and I'll have to dig it up for you. I don't want to just speak out of turn here, but that Clinton actually had information about Osama bin Laden and chose not to act on it. So technically, if you want to argue that he could have possibly prevented 9/11, because and I know that nobody has a crystal ball, but
Yeah,
there are some evidence out there that there is evidence out there, I should say, that by some people that say that the intel on the uh, movements of Al Qaeda and Osama bin Laden have been known, and the danger has been at least somewhat foreseeable. And yet he chose not to act on it because, as you said, he didn't have any big disasters. He just figured it's easier that way, and he was dealing with the whole Monica Lewinsky deal. So
right,
we're
right.
just
I
gonna,
mean, I think our whole disastrous 20th, 21st century begins with Clinton lying about the blowjobs. Um,
okay.
but also Clinton did try to blow up bin Laden that one time, and he ended up blowing up an aspirin factory.
Right.
I don't know.
Okay. But just real quick, just to go back to that thing you said. Oh, Clinton lied about blowjobs like it's not a big deal, and I would argue that if
It
you
is a
just for a
big deal. It
second,
had set
it is
the.
a
I
huge
mean,
deal because if you consider the fact that everybody lost their collective minds when they heard Trump say something 10 years before he ran for president, 10 years, not in the Oval Office, but 10 years before he ran for president, he said something about they will let you grab them by the, and everybody
yeah.
just lost their collective minds. And we're talking about a consensual act that he was bragging about to another guy while Clinton was actually getting blowjobs in the Oval Office. So had this been Trump, we would have heard about this 24/7 for the rest of our lives. That would have never ended. So the fact that
Well,
the media has been covering for somebody like Clinton, and then Obama had it super easy because they were carrying water for him all along. He could do no wrong. No, it didn't matter what he did. It did not matter
I
what
mean,
he did.
this is a whole bunch of different separate arguments to have. But the idea that I, a liberal, blame the whole 21st century on fucking Clinton, who couldn't just beat off to porn like a regular guy. Um, now you wouldn't think that I know what being a guy, I know kind of what he was thinking. He was thinking, maybe, our blowjobs really sex. If I say that we didn't have sex, can I get it? And it's like, and he didn't know there was the blue dress and all that. It's a
Maya,
bunch of.
Maya, you'll learn if you stay on this show to avoid certain
Yeah, because
holes,
I'm a
rabbit
filthy
holes.
guy. But anyway,
Well,
the
I'm
deal is
Please
sorry,
don't
that
go rabbit
Maya.
hole. I
the,
just
the
figure, yeah, I hear
all
you.
right, the implications, the
Oh,
all right, well, give me a sec. Well, like, I just read in the LA Times
Did
today
the
that
public
of the
hear that?
30,
Director, did the public hear that?
all right, the shit, the director, or I'll say, the shift, it's like, the director's asking about, like, how much, starting with Adam Schiff, who was the head of intelligence, how much studying of China's potential to fuck us over with some pandemic, you know, you know, how much of that was going on. And in today's LA Times, I read that of the 30 pandemic response specialists that were working for the White House, um, or emergency response specialists who were working in the White House for the White House when Trump took over, only 8 remain. And Trump fired 70 people from the CDC, 70% of the people from the CDC who are working in China. So
he combined some of the
yeah,
agencies
all right.
within it.
So he's getting
It
anyway.
wasn't so much
But
that they
let me get
fired
back
him.
to the other thing real
Go ahead.
quick, which is, in the you'd think lying about. I mean, every guy in the A lot of guys have lied about their sexual records, and under normal circumstances, it's not the worst thing in the world. The circumstances made Clinton's lies about the BJ's um, catastrophic for the future of the country, in my opinion. Frickin' Gore gets pissed off that Clinton has debased the office. He sidelines Clinton, um, doesn't use him on the campaign trail. Gore loses his home state. He loses Florida, um, and we get Bush, who starts a war based on what in conjunction with anyway, the whole thing. But it starts with the BJ anyway. But the deal is that Bush had the bad luck to get hit with 9/11. Uh, Trump has had the terrible luck of being the president who gets hit with the pandemic, and that's so it's not his fault that the pandemic happened under him, but you can fault him for what he did leading up to it and what he's done after it.
Well,
And
what did he do leading up to it? I mean, he was busy
he,
being impeached by Adam Schiff, who
yeah,
was,
but I mean, we can have all this argument, but that argument's being held all day, every day on uh, social media. How much of his distraction was impeachment, how much of it was rallies and playing golf,
well, I
how
mean,
I
much
have
of
a
maybe,
it was
question.
hold
Wait,
on, how much of it was China covering up shit.
yeah,
As a liberal, I believe, that it all rests on Trump. The
okay,
China
Rick,
sucks,
right, but
Rick,
he
but
mentioned
Rick,
he mentioned the pandemic during his State of the Union address, right? It was mentioned in the State of the Union, something that Nancy Pelosi promptly tore up right behind his back, right, in front of the cameras, so very demonstratively. So, I mean, it's not like he wasn't addressing it at all, and without having a crystal ball and with only having a handful of cases total at that time, you cannot tell me that say shutting down sooner would have been accepted, while everybody was telling him at the end of January when he said shutting down the travel from China was being xenophobic. So you
Well,
can't
just
tell me that that won't
I
happen.
would have liked, just personally, I would have liked a shitload of testing. I remember the one week where the CDC did a
For
total of
what? Nobody
77
knew what it
tests.
was, and China didn't tell us what it was, and nobody knew what it was. Nobody had anything.
Well,
So the
we knew
fact that we
enough to have
developed,
a test that we could do, but there was a week where we only did 77 tests, 11 tests a day for the whole country, which is incredibly
Rick,
lackadaisical.
Rick. Maya, let me just try to
go ahead.
respond to this. Rick thinks that Trump should have had a test that doesn't exist. The best test we had took a week to get the results,
He was
and we
offered
didn't.
tests from other countries, and he turned them
We
down.
none of those tests take less than a week. It doesn't
Yeah,
matter.
but still do
He,
the tests and you have the results in a week.
The test
Rick.
was
Let
coming
me
back
talk.
with
Let me talk.
30%. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Let me talk. So the point is that Rick imagines that a test that didn't exist, we now have tests that test in 15 minutes. Trump should have already known about a test that no one had invented yet and been testing hundreds of thousands of people when the CDC did not have the ability to do that. Trump is not the CDC. He's not in charge of that. And we did not have the facilities or the science to do that, Rick. The test had not even been invented.
We were offered
Wait,
tests for this very
not
virus,
not not that can find out whether you have it in 15 minutes.
but who
It
cares whether
still would
it's
have.
7 days or 15 minutes? He
I,
wasted 70 days.
no,
And
he
so,
did not. Because wait a minute, and there's something you keep avoiding addressing.
okay,
And Maya touched on it, but in cowardly fashion, you refuse to touch this. Now
which?
we have a choice, Rick. Trump, the most dramatic thing that Trump did, he did two dramatic things.
Oh,
The
the
first
travel ban.
was to ban travel to China, and Biden opposed it, and you voted for Biden. So my point is, if we had gone with your choice, then there would not have been a travel ban to China because Biden accused Trump of racism. So my point is, how if we'd have had a Democrat in office, the man you voted for, then China would never have been shut down, and we'd have had 10 times the cases. And by the way, the only man in the room that said that we need to ban travel to China because it was so unusual was Trump. So how do you address that?
we've talked about this, and I
Yeah, and you
agreed
have
with
avoided
you.
it.
Hold on. I haven't avoided it. I've said one of the few good things he did was that. Now, it was not super effective because they've traced the path that the virus took to America, and some of it came from China, but a lot of it came to America via Europe because from people from
But then,
China
but then, but then
traveling to
he,
Europe and then to
Yeah,
America.
that was the second.
but
That
then
was the
he,
second
but then
travel
he,
ban.
but then he banned travel from Europe, Rick.
Yeah,
So
but
if
kind of
anything, and wait,
it
and
was
wait,
too little,
and
too late for that shit. But the
well,
deal is that
it wasn't too little too late. At the time he was imposing these bans, we had only a handful of cases in the whole of the US. And nobody
then we
would
should have
ever
been
have
able to get
agreed.
on those cases. That's no wait. I'll say yeah, we had many fewer cases, so we should have been able to get a good handle on them with testing, even if it took a week to get the results back. Test the people. It's inexcusable that you had a week early on when we knew the virus was here where the CDC only performed 77 tests.
But
And
how can you blame Trump for that?
well, Trump did all this fucking stripping of the CDC, and if Trump was
He
that
didn't
worried as he
strip.
should
No,
have
no,
been,
no,
he should
no.
have.
The CDC had a higher budget under Trump than they did under Obama.
He just
Fine, but where are
combined.
the
He
fucking
combined some of the
tests?
things.
Somebody has to do the tests. And
But the
remember
test
the
didn't actually
sign on
exist.
fucking. Remember the sign on Harry Truman's desk. The buck stops here. Whereas Trump said, "I'm not responsible." And here's something that I think you'll hear increasingly because it shows up during every presidential campaign in the last 6 months, in the last couple months of the campaign, you'll hear the question, are you better off now than you were 4 years ago? And Trump's had bad luck, but that's part of being president. And what he
So you want
where
people to vote for the person that was against the travel ban with China.
okay, Biden was wrong about that. Yeah, but yeah,
But then Biden was infinitely more wrong than Trump. Then Biden's crime was infinitely more severe, would have caused 10 times the deaths.
And in
no,
addition to that,
because
if I can just interject real quick, because
Go
if you
ahead.
look at, because it also has to be done locally, right? So the reason New York is such an epicenter as opposed to, say, Montana, right? Because you have people more spread out and they don't have subways, etc. But New
yeah,
York also told their people as late as was it middle of March? I think they were still telling people go to movies, do whatever you
Yeah.
want to do. We had Nancy
Go.
Pelosi in late February after she tried to stop Trump from doing his travel ban. She also, that was the only bill that she would bring, by the way, to the House floor at the time. She also 3 weeks later was still telling people come to Chinatown, everything's fine. So you can say the buck stops with him. That's true. He's the president, but he cannot go to each and every state and become the mayor and the governor of each and every state, right? Because everybody said
right.
he was being such a tyrant, such a dictator. Well, he's not, because he let the local localities take care of their own stuff, and this is how they handle it locally. So you can only do so much in a country as large as ours and as diverse as ours.
Okay. I mean,
The,
when there's a big car wreck,
Hmm.
the adjusters and the lawyers and everybody they try to figure out of 100% blame who gets how much blame, and there's plenty of blame to go around. China deserves a lot of blame. Trump
Right.
deserves, I'm going to say he deserves more blame than you're going to say. But if you want to blame what Biden said, what Pelosi said, what various governors said or did, there's plenty of blame to go around. I mean, fucking, I don't know. I probably deserve some blame because I did. There are several Republican senators, maybe some Democratic ones too, who sold all their fucking stocks once they were briefed on the coming of the epidemic.
Right.
And
That was atrocious. You're right. They were both Republican and
but
Democrats, and you had
I
those.
did the same thing. I unloaded everything. I watched my mother-in-law's money. I sold all her shit and was I don't remember, was I on Twitter screaming like everybody start washing your hands, start bugging, I'm probably negligent too because I can see it coming, and all I did was try to cover my family's ass. Was I hope if you look back at my Twitter that I was saying this shit is coming, like start yelling about it. But I there's plenty of blame.
So, so then, just like
Well,
an
speak,
insurance adjuster, you can say, you know what, let's blame everybody. But the problem is that you've got your mainstream media who've been beating up on Trump since day one, since before he even took office, right? They've been beating up. You can say he had the bad luck of having the pandemic. That's true. But he didn't just have the pandemic. He had the media beating up on him from day one with Russia, 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 and then it was, Stormy Daniels, and then it was, Ukraine, and then it was okay. Well, let's impeach him for this phone call, and let's do this. I mean, he literally, like, the fact that he got anything done, and the reason I would give him credit for, because I was never on the Trump train from the beginning. That was never me, and yet he actually earned my vote, because now I see that he actually did what he said he was going to do. I mean, you can say I'm biased because it's an Israeli thing, but um, the moving of the embassy to Jerusalem, boom, right there. He said, because you before him you had Clinton, you had Bush, you had Obama. Everybody said they were going to do it. Nobody did it. He went ahead and did it, and he said he did the crime bill, which again people call him racist. How is he racist when 90% of the people who are benefiting from the crime bill, the First Steps bill, that are usually black folks, aren't they? Because who put all of them in jail? I think it was Biden's
Yeah, yeah. No, it
wife,
was a
right?
Clinton era
So
kind of freaking thing. Yeah, and
right.
Biden had.
So
Yeah,
there's
okay.
all of that. So I mean, he did the crime bill. He did the the traditionally black colleges. He allocated a bunch of money. He did all kinds of things that he said he was going to do, and he did them. So the fact that he's actually, however he dealt with it, it's not perfect. I'm not one of those people who thinks everything he does is perfect, but compared to, like you said, there's plenty of blame to go around. And I actually, I mean, unfortunately, I wish that he didn't listen to Fauci and Briggs and said, okay, let's shut it down. But at the same time, I would say the fact that he was willing to listen as a businessman who knows how important business is, and he was still willing to shut it down. I have a lot more faith in him and our economy coming back and reopening. If if it had been, Clinton or Biden or anybody else in office, I would be very, very scared right now and probably trying to move to New Zealand. And I'm not even joking about this, because
Well, New
I
Zealand has like no. New Zealand has had like four people die from the frickin'. If it's New Zealand's
right,
and
but
plus
there's
it's
no.
pretty as hell. New Zealand would be a good place to move.
Exactly. No, I've been to New Zealand. I think it's awesome. My point is that, how he responded to it, I think is actually admirable, considering, again, he's standing in front of the press, who's all they're looking for is gotcha questions all day long. When they're comparing our death toll to Vietnam War, I mean, that makes no sense. A war is something you chose to enter into, or there was a political motivation or whatever. But literally, they're blaming him for the pandemic, which you're saying correctly. You're saying I cannot blame him for that. You can
No, I'm
maybe
not
say,
saying that. I'm saying no. I'm saying that he had a lot of choices he could make, and one of the correct choices he tried to make was this travel ban. But not pushing for other stuff, for
but that's because he's not a
dawdling.
socialist. He's not a socialist. When you force private industry to do the state's bidding, you are now nationalizing the private industry. And he did work with them, by the way. He did work with private industry to get them to work with him. But if you're going to start forcing people to do stuff, now you're going back to the whole socialism thing. And trust me, it does not end in a good place. It ends in a very, very bad place.
I don't know. I
It's
think there's a way to make people manufacture enough of those long
and they have
swabs.
been. And they have been. I mean, not the swabs,
And
but I mean, like the PPEs that we're missing, and like that guy with the My Pillow guy who started making masks, and all. I mean, people have been doing stuff. He
I
had
don't know,
other
but I mean, then
industries
why not more
working,
tests? Why don't we? Where are the tests we were promised?
Rick,
and
we're doing
they
more
are
testing. We've
margin.
tested 7 million Americans. We're testing
Yeah,
more people. We've had more tests than the next 5 countries combined.
Yeah, but we have the same population as the next 5 countries combined.
But the
So
point is that we're the world's leader in testing. We're testing more
yeah, but
every
we're
day. It
playing
keeps
catch up.
increasing. We're playing
We're
catch up
playing catch up.
because you're unfairly accusing him of doing something no one could do.
Yeah, nobody
No
Like,
one
accused
okay,
him
could
here's
have
really.
the
done
deal. Here's the fucking
millions of
no.
tests in the very
Here's the
beginning.
fucking deal. Like, if you kill Hitler in 1932, then you don't have to kill a million Nazi soldiers in 1944. If you stop the
All right,
virus early with
all right,
testing and contact tracing,
But
I
nobody
just
had a
wait.
crystal ball in 1932, and nobody had a crystal ball in January of this year.
people have
I mean,
plenty of
literally
crystal
asking
balls.
for.
But like, we've been going forever. We should wrap this up.
Agreed.
Wait. I just have one last thing to say. Epidemiologists have say, listen, the testing period when testing would have made any difference is kind of over, Rick. Now, the only thing you can do is treat it. The virus is
But
already spread throughout the United
it
States.
turns out not, and the evidence is that the more people we test, the rate that it's not you if it were every place, then if you double the amount of tests, you should double the amount of positives. But as we increase the amount of testing, the percentage of positives has been going down, which means we are finding a lot of it. And
Okay, I'm listening to other epidemiologists that say that it may be as high, it's 25% of the population in the big cities has it already, and 10% out in Montana, North Dakota, places like that. What doesn't matter that the horses have already left the barn. Testing's
yeah,
not going to
so
save you, Rick.
you can build fucking new barns for your horses, like the
Why are
dorms,
they
like
why are
the
they closed?
insurance office.
Why did now Trump built 28 hospitals, 28 hospitals, and they're
Yeah.
closing down almost all of them because they didn't
Yeah,
get enough
because we
patients.
didn't go as
Because
fully exponential. But
And
we're
and
right,
seeing,
also you look at Georgia, who started opening up, and look at Florida, who didn't close down nearly as early as we did. They're not doing any worse off than California is.
we'll see.
wait.
And
No, actually, Florida has more older people, and they were
Right.
far less like locked down, and they have roughly the same amount of deaths as California, which is now a
Yep.
police state.
well, California has 40 million people. Florida has 21 million people.
No, but
So
I'm talking about numbers per million, deaths per million, cases per million. Florida is actually doing roughly the same as we are, and they have half the lockdown. They're opening
yeah,
up.
that it looks like that now. And I mean, I got to give you that point at this point in time.
And you were also wrong about Sweden. Sweden is
No,
not.
fucking Sweden. No, you know what? Sweden, I'm not fucking wrong about. They had 2,000 deaths last week or 2,200.
Hang
They're
on,
up to
let me
about
take a look.
3,000
I'll tell
now.
you right now.
The
Yeah, but
3,000 the
three
3,000 is more than the total deaths of the other of their buddies combined. You got Norway,
no,
you got Finland, you've got Denmark, and
yeah,
you
but
combine
yeah,
they
but
countries only have about 600 deaths apiece. So
okay, I
Sweden all by
understand
Right
that.
now,
itself has
32.25.
Okay, Rick, if you compare the rates of deaths per million in Sweden to any of the other European countries like France, Britain, Spain, Italy, Belgium, Luxembourg, it turns
yeah.
out that Sweden is actually less, and they didn't lock down at all.
Yeah, well, Belgium's a special case because they report, if you
Yeah,
died, take it. No,
but I'm saying that
the
yeah,
other
you can
countries,
find
yeah, they have
you can
everybody, Sweden and us and France, Spain, um, yeah, they all have death rates of several hundred per million.
well
Um,
the point I'm trying to make is that it's true that there are some countries that ended up doing better per million, but most countries are doing much worse than Sweden, and they never locked down at all.
no, not most countries. A
Yeah, that's
couple badly hit countries, Italy and Spain. and then a
No,
couple little countries.
Well,
Britain and
France
Britain and
also
Well,
has
and
it.
France,
the UK
yeah,
and the UK fucked up
and
like
Belgium.
crazy too. The UK has been climbing the charts with a bullet. I think they're in third place now for no second place in deaths, which is stupid for a country of only 60 million people. But they had Boris Johnson in charge, and he was kind of working off the Swedish model, and so they've had a shitload of deaths, and it continues to climb. In fucking, you don't want to be the UK, you don't want to be Sweden, you kind of don't want to be us.
You do want to be Sweden. Sweden is
You
doing
Sweden
don't
okay.
want to
They have
fucking
an
be.
right
acceptable
now,
number of
Sweden has
deaths.
only 3,200, 3,225 cases. Right now, I'm looking at the site that does it
Yeah,
live
Yeah,
update.
yeah,
Sweden has a
Whirlometer.
3,225, and UK is at like 31,000. So
yeah.
it's
That's
considerably different. But
no. Well, no. UK has Sweden has 10 million. UK has 60 million people. So they're not that different in their death rates, and they're both
Well,
you
my
know
point is that they never had a lockdown, Rick. So we didn't need to do this.
Yeah, but fucking compare it to the examples you want to use for countries who did it right are South Korea, who has roughly the same population as France, as the UK, as Spain, and South Korea's had 11,000 total cases and like 260 deaths. So
But they also in South Korea have a very weak lockdown. They did the same
because they
thing
did the test,
they,
because they
they,
tested early and
they
they
yeah,
nailed it.
they
They
did the
found out
same
who
but not
had
just
it.
testing, they did contract tracing too.
they did the
They
same
did
thing that
testing and contact tracing, which is what
Contact
I'm
tracing.
yeah,
talking about, what I've been talking about. And we can't do it as effectively because we didn't kill Hitler in 32, but we can still kill Hitler in like 38 or 40 while before he's invaded the Sudetenland. He's taken Czechoslovakia, he's taken you know, fucking Poland, but he hasn't fucking taken France yet. We can still do shit with testing and contact tracing.
I'm going to throw something in right now that hasn't been mentioned, and then I think we're done. At least
Okay.
I'm done. And that is that they're going to start doing investigations after all this, and they're going to find two things: that the decision the governors made to put sick people in the rest homes was the worst decision of any of them. And those were Democrat governors. But there's one other thing nobody's mentioned because it's very difficult for this to come out, and that is that the uh, the New York hospitals are doing incredibly bad work. That a lot of these deaths, they're saying, are caused by incompetent New York medical systems. So
Who's
I would
saying that?
nurses are coming forward. Several nurses have come
On
forward
what?
and
On
said
Breitbart? On what channels?
there are several nurses that have made YouTube videos. They're legitimate nurses. They work in New York hospitals that are saying the New York hospitals are killing people and that a huge percentage of these deaths are preventable. And that the virus is deadly, but New York medical system incompetence is equally deadly.
And can I just
Okay.
add one thing? I just need to add one more thing to this is because you're for every COVID diagnosis, the hospital gets, I think, was it $11,300, I believe, is the correct number?
$40,000.
And well,
40
and it goes up
40,000
to
if
it
someone
is three
dies.
times that. It's three times that if the patient goes on a ventilator. So they're pretty much when they're forcing the doctor's hand in making it a COVID death, they're pretty much saying we need to bump up our numbers because um, we've lost so much business, because we've canceled all the knee surgeries and all the hip replacements, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And in addition to that, sometimes, and I don't know about like killing patients due to incompetence, but I know that if they put them on a ventilator and they get almost $40,000, sometimes that is what's causing the death. Because if you're putting a patient on a ventilator too soon, you're going to cause their lungs to collapse. I was talking to a nurse actually yesterday, and she was saying like if you're putting a patient on a ventilator too soon, you're basically killing them. And
So
so if they have to go
that's
on
the
a ventilator,
main
that's
way
one thing.
that's the
But if you're
main
doing it
way that they're doing it is
right, and
they're
the
putting
problem and the
people on
problem is
ventilators
that
that never
that
needed them.
right. And the problem is that once Medicare said, oh, we're going to get 11.3 thousand for regular COVID, and then you're getting three times that, which is almost $40,000 for um, a ventilator patient. Now you're pretty much forcing their hand in that, and
You're
it's
not going to convince me that they were intentional. Now you can argue incompetence, but I'm not going to buy malice. That you're not going to convince me that the
I'm not saying they're doing it
doctors.
on purpose. I'm saying they're doing it to bump up their numbers, not realizing that what they're causing is death, and that it's part of the incompetence. It's part of the incompetence
and
argument.
Yeah. All
and
right.
the
So
people
I
that
mean,
are dying
we'll
the
find out.
most
We're gonna
are
when all
are
this
in
is said when all this is
the
said and done. Like, look at AIDS. AIDS has killed about as many people as the Civil War and as the Spanish flu, about just under 700,000 people in America over the past 40 years. And it's such a huge story, and eventually, a lot of the major details get worked out, and we find out, we know that Reagan was too slow to um, to acknowledge the problem, that um, that it was, there were all these initial, they thought it was confined to gay people, that Nancy Reagan became kind of heroic a few years in when she urged, I guess, Reagan to acknowledge, and like, so there were plenty of good guys and plenty of bad guys and plenty of mistakes, and it's going to be it'll take years to sort out, who was shitty and who was good, and some people might turn out to be that Cuomo was good in some ways and horrible in other ways, um, and some governors will turn out to be smart or lucky or whatever, and but it's going to take time to sort it all out. It's just going to take, and we'll find out. But
Yeah.
right now, it's still a fucking wait and see. And a lot of people, the people that you're angry at, are a lot of these people are trying to do their best, and
and
and people.
also there are several Democrat governors that made it illegal for a doctor to administer hydroxychloroquine and zinc.
Well, when we have enough time to do decent studies, there's studies going on, and we'll
Yeah,
find
but that's
out
a
whether
drug that's been used.
The
It's been used
FDA,
for
the wait,
years and years. We know it's not
the
going to kill people. Why not
the
try it
it does
anyway?
kill
the
Why make it
in the
illegal?
studies. In the
the
studies
FDA,
that
the
are
FDA
legit,
has
they find out that about one patient in eight develops abnormal heart rhythms from the hydroxy. Though the
no,
big study that was just in
that's
the
not
New
true.
England Journal
That's
of Medicine said 12% were developed. Actually, no, I might be confusing a couple studies, but no, so a certain percentage develop it. So
no, no, actually, the head of the Lupus Society, who's
he's just
administered
one.
more hydroxychloroquine than anybody on earth, says that it's as safe as Tylenol if it's given correctly in correct dosage.
Well, all these
So
people doing all these
that's
other studies were at
well,
whatever dosage they were using.
they're talking about a few thousand people. This guy's given millions of dosages,
And you have to
and he
find out
says
who's
it's as
financing the
safe as
studies. You got to find
Tylenol.
out who's financing the studies, because
Well,
there's
What?
wait,
always motivation behind them.
Wait. What's Maya saying?
I'm sorry?
yeah,
Well, I mean, it's all wrapped up in the same thing. I said we have, we it's the highest number of people not participating in the job market, 103,415,000 Americans, the most ever, who are not part of uh, there's a special, there are different terms for different types of unemployment, but 103 million Americans aren't participating in the job market, which is the highest percentage since 1973.
and
33.
I have a theory, and that is that the blue state governors are doing this on purpose. They want to destroy the economy. They like what's
But they
happening
want the people
because
dependent on the government.
The Republican states are opening up.
45 states are opening up, and
No,
not
no,
all of
no,
those
no, no,
are
no, no.
Republican states.
Open. I read I read that. I read that list. It was in the New York Times, some left-wing paper, and they counted The ability to go get a bagel as opening up. The ability to use a skateboard but not surf as opening up. The Republican states, Texas, Florida, Montana, they're opening up. The left-wing states are continuing the depression. And my theory is that they want to destroy the economy. I can't, because they know they'd have the same numbers that the red states, Florida and Texas, have. So I don't know why they want to destroy the economy of
Because
California and New
All right.
York.
because they
Why
want the
is that?
people dependent on the government. Because
All
that's your
right, so
socialism right
let's
there.
wrap it up, and I'll let you. Let me just have one little last word, which is, yeah, we have a lot of unemployment, and we can argue about all that, but I just got to say that the people with the money, the stock market is optimistic. We peaked at 29,000 before all this started, but we bounced back. We're at 24,000, which is still like many thousands of points higher than the stock market was at when Trump took over. So there is some economic optimism, and
Well, that's good.
All right.
Unfortunately, we're also printing money by the trillions, and
that's
it's going to
true.
cause inflation. So, and the inflation part is going to come into the equation by the end of the year, and then it's going to be a huge problem.
Yep.
And I and,
All
and I
right.
do believe that. I'm
Wait,
sorry.
don't hang up because I want to talk to you guys after the show.
Okay.
I said, all right, fine.
All right. Throw money at us, Lance. Well, nobody has any money. Do we need to beg for money during this time of trouble? Now, let's wrap it up. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
All right, are we
Maya,
signed
thank
off?
you.
Are we off?